Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, there are over 200,000 of them, representing over 400 designs, and it's fair to say that Angelenos have had a love affair with them for many decades. I'm talking about LA street lamps, and I'm delighted to be joined today by the new director of the Bureau of Los Angeles Street Lamps, Miguel Sangalang. So nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me as well.
All right, you've been in that illuminating chair for not a long period of time at this moment.
Yep, just about 1 week or so.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
That it's, I know that everyone's very happy to have you there. So, we kind of talk about street lamps and everything like that, but what's the scope of the Bureau of Streetlights?
Sure. If you were to talk about the specific scope, in charter, it's to maintain the street light infrastructure of the city on behalf of its residents. I think, though, that ever since the beginning of the Bureau, it's been far more than that, more than meets the eye. You can see that the very first time we had street lights, there was a transformative change in how we approached public safety, and we thought that was a much safer than more illuminated city. Made night a much more pleasant time to be around and walking around the city. Now we actually see it kind of changing in the technology that we're applying, more around connectivity, and so it's been a way for us to install new technologies like 4 and 5G infrastructure that will help accelerate our reach and our bandwidth and space around what we can do on the internet. So lots of different things happening right now.
And that's kind of your bailiwick. That's sort of your background. You're the innovation, you're the technology guy. You're the guy that, looks into the future and makes it a little bit more. So how did you end up in this position? Because you were actually, the deputy mayor for budget and innovation. So this is definitely your realm, high-tech stuff.
Yeah, I've been called the bean counter before, so it's okay. You don't have to share anything. Yeah, it definitely has been. I actually, before even that role, I was a systems analyst. I started my career in the city as a system analyst in the Bureau of Sanitation. So very much working on the back office kind of function, the technology aspects of it, helping help desk. So a lot of the formulation or the start of my kind of interest in it. And then I was building computers with my dad when I was even younger, right? So had my history with all the 486s and Pentiums back then. And obviously as part of the role in the deputy mayor for budget innovation, it was kind of interesting. I always saw myself as making sure that some crazy ideas don't happen and other crazy ideas do. So, and some of those have been using technology. So I think there's a lot of effort for us that we're doing right now, that the city is doing right now to make it a better place, using those technologies as well.
So what are some of the things that need to be addressed, in your new role? You're talking about how you can, with using technology, the 5G technology, expanding the infrastructure, safety, and everything like that. So what are some of the things that are really on your front of page that you want to address quickly?
Sure. I think it's been broad stroked, kind of categorized as smart city, but actually there's many different facets to that, and we've been helping many of the different departments in the city on Vision Zero. So we've worked on transitional lighting, and that is an aspect where we actually have an area of the city where after events, pre-COVID, after events, we would actually make areas brighter after large events that would end. Oh. And so, in that, we would make it safer for pedestrians who were walking across the street, for motorists to see them as well. Then it would dim back once everything was done. We have technologies now that we're deploying that will help us kind of mash up satellite information with street-level sensors. So satellite information from JPL will be mashed up with our information at the ground level to give us better insights on the air quality that we actually breathe. And that'll help policymakers make decisions on what we should be doing in the future as well. So lots of different things that we're attaching to our poles. It's far more than what, again, I mentioned earlier, the charter just says maintain the street lights, but far more because it's a vertical piece of infrastructure that everybody wants to have a little bit of play with, to be honest.
You just made me think of something. Okay, so let's take this just into the hypothetical sci-fi world. You're talking about large-scale events, which happen in Los Angeles all the time. We definitely have the Olympics coming, assuming that the world is a place in which that is going to be able to be possible.
Very soon.
Very soon. I know. Well, we're doing good if we can make sure that the rest of the planet also catches on. But so, literally, you can put the dimmer switch up to full so that it's well light. Is that possible, say, in areas you would used to be used to having the helicopter spotlight come down when something dramatic has happened? Is it even possible in the future to maybe create an environment where you can, turn the lights up bright in an area in which something is a crisis is occurring? Maybe it's a fire, maybe it's an earthquake issue. Well, if there's an earthquake, there might be problems with that, or a crime or something?
When it comes to public emergencies, I think that's where some of the smart city aspects will help. Wouldn't it be great if in the future, if with all of our smart nodes, if there's a tsunami warning, instead of just looking at the road for the static sign, you can actually see the flashing lights on the street lights as well. So many things that we can kind of apply technology to resolve some of those issues. I think much of that still has to be formulated in policy and what we're trying to achieve. And we also have to kind of refresh our entire infrastructure. So we have an aging infrastructure that we have to deal with right now. We're hoping to refresh it. We're working on pilot programs to do that, and then also looking at kind of future strategies to try and turn that over as well.
Okay, so you talked about safety, but then there's also light pollution. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that those two things, because not only are we supposed to be a smart city, we're supposed to be a green city. Mm-hmm. So balancing those two things out, what are some of the things that will help illuminate and create a safe environment, but at the same time understand that what we do affects the planet at large? Yeah,
and I think the Bureau has had a history of that, and I'm very happy to have interacted with the Bureau in many different ways and different roles before, and supporting some of the work that we've been able to achieve. So over the past 10 years, we've had our LED lighting retrofit program that mm-hmm. changed our high-intensity discharge lights to very energy-efficient lighting, LED lighting. And that has been a great reduction. It's almost like taking over 60,000 cars off the road and saving $10 million a year. So it's been a great savings that have then allowed us the space to do more of the smart city things that we'd like to do because we have spare capacity and energy. I think that to what you're asking when you talk about light pollution, I think that's where we're looking at the greatest amount of flexibility, very similar to transitional lighting, where we're kind of making it brighter for times that require it. We have over time changed the light temperature so that it is less impactful to the larger environment as well. So lots of different changes that require flexibility that we are hoping greater technology adoption and use will help us manage over time.
Because to your point about LED lighting and something that is more gentle on the environment, I mean, we have also experienced that LED lighting in the home creates a gray, awful pallor that it's not really necessarily attractive. So there is function and there is aesthetic. Mm-hmm. So are you concerned with aesthetic as well in regards to this looks pretty? Not just the structure, because I want to talk to you about the lamps themselves, but I mean in terms of human response to the light around you, that it's not cold and harsh and gray or ugly or something just because it lights a large area.
Right, and we've obviously been adhering as much as we can to national standards that have been set. But at your point, and to the point that I made earlier about flexibility, we're trying to do the right thing, right? So some of these are going to be places where we're actually open to different types of changes that we see, either the color temperature, glare shields, other technologies that are put in place. So lots of variability that we hope will lead to greater flexibility and then a better kind of quality of life.
Okay, so let's talk about the lamps themselves, mm-hmm. because as I said, there's honestly been a relationship with LA street lamps. Artistically, we have urban lights in front of LACMA. Mm-hmm. There's books on the history of the lamps. They've been installed for special events and occasions. They demonstrate the personality of a community. I mean, even the mayor's office had the project view. So, the actual literal artistic aesthetic of a street lamp, how is that going?
Right. Very, very, well, that's a wide range.
Yes, it is. Sorry.
But I think in a good way. So you mentioned urban lights. We even had working with the artist and partner.
Oh, Sheila Klein.
Sheila Klein, mm-hmm. Yes. We had Vermonica that we had installed as well, just recently reopened during the pandemic, of course, but still, as soon as everything gets safer, we hope people can see it too, since some of those pieces are harkening back to 1925 when the Bureau was started. So lots of very cool things. You actually kind of reminded me, I had kind of shown people before pictures where I had a black and white Charlie Chaplin kind of flick. You had Singing in the Rain, and then you had La La Land, right? And just in each of these scenes, you have the light kind of portrayed there, and very much a big piece of the actual kind of frame of the moment. And so, yes, I think Los Angeles has always been quite open to lights, and their affinity for it, very much known. The aesthetics, I find it interesting because that is descriptive of the different neighborhoods that we have. And so you have historical areas that have their lights that, again, harken back to the beginning of when we were created, to other places. They had like Figueroa Special, and so different districts would have their own kind of iconic ones. And then, as you mentioned, recently the mayor had the street light competition, LA Lights the Way, that kind of created our new prototype, if you will, new model that we're hoping to implement at some point. We're going through engineering on that one right now, but it's this amazing kind of description of a super bloom that would be Los Angeles, right? It's something that it's a bouquet of lights and other kind of assets that you could attach. Very much the bouquet that Los Angeles is when it comes to its communities, the different kind of places and cultures that it touches, and different little lifestyles that you run into.
I really want to talk about Super Bloom, but before, let's put a little perspective on what we were talking about with Vermonica. That was a light installation that had to be moved, so it was originally in a parking lot, was it not?
Yeah, and now we've moved it to very close to our main yard at Santa Monica and Lyman. It's actually across a branch library at Coanga, and so we worked with the artist to rededicate it last December. And now we are able to kind of show it and display it. We hope to have a bigger fanfare about it and hope to light it up really well in the near future.
Because we all know Urban Lights, which is in front of LACMA, because, if you ever drive up and down Wilshire, if you're allowed, when there's no construction. But this also kind of represents the legacy of Los Angeles and the lamps from the different environs that represent the diversity and the, just the vast interesting qualities of the city.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it shows a great progression from 1925 onward to the history of Los Angeles. So it's a great Instagrammable, just like Urban Lights, place to go to.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go to the now, and the project winner was Super Bloom, and you said that too. But Super Bloom, if I understand it correctly, can do even more than just light. That these will be conduits to different other things that can be used, utilizing a street. I mean, like charging cars and things like that.
Right. And so, I mean, the concept of that utility is there. That's what we're hoping for. That's the nature of also Super Bloom, to be able to have it interchangeable and put new technologies on it, to put street furniture, to put shade, to put, as you're saying, electric vehicles, and we've been deploying electric vehicles on our street lights for quite a while now. So yes, absolutely, that's one of the main goals of it as well.
Okay, well, to that point, I was fascinated to learn that because there's so much infrastructure already provided in a street lamp, that it is possible that even in the future, they may, and I'm using quotes around the word may, be able to help with Los Angeles and the digital divide.
That's, I think, a place where clearly during the pandemic, there was a widening digital divide that we can see. And one of the strategies that ended up happening was the use of Wi-Fi hotspots, right, from the different carriers, right, and distributing that to children that would otherwise not have access. Well, those Wi-Fi hotspots are connected to infrastructure that are attached to our streetlights and other public facilities, and so it was very important for us to accelerate that as well. So, you can't bridge the divide if you only have one piece of the puzzle there. And so we've been very much accelerating. We actually accelerated our 4 and 5G permitting about 2,600% over the last few years to try and accelerate that.
So we think of street lamps as obviously they're part of our civic infrastructure, just like freeways and lights and freeways and streets, etc. But, this kind of advanced thinking as to how we can broach the digital divide, I mean, that also requires this pretty elaborate cooperative effort between, public, private, and governmental partnerships. And I know that you've, been a part of that before. So how important is that cooperative effort?
Yeah, I think very easily you can see natural relationships with government, academic institutions, in that we partner often with them, right, for different studies. In fact, we're partnering with Cal State LA and NASA, right, for what I referred to as our Predicting the Air We Breathe, where we mash up satellite information with ground sensors. And so very much natural partnerships that you see there. I think we have also realized that we're going to need to partner more with the private entities. And so we have, especially in places where it's budding technologies, where we have sensors that we're looking to deploy, but we're not really sure if that's the right technology yet, starting up pilot projects for those. We have different kind of requests for information around broadband and Wi-Fi connectivity, because that is a very large discussion that's happening now, and we're looking for the right answers to give the best advice to those that are going to make those decisions around that. And so lots of different things where we're going to end up being hand-in-hand partners and trying to solve these large problems together.
Because we have such an urban sprawl, I mean, Los Angeles in terms of a city is basically 6 countries all put together. But how are we faring compared to other major cities? Are we leaders, or are we cooperative partners, or how are we doing in regards to, these issues that definitely impact all of us?
Yeah, I think probably at the turn of the early 2010s or so, Los Angeles was a little bit more nascent. We started late to the party with regards to open data and some of the work around that for Civic and for Civic technology, trying to create partnerships with super user residents, right? But we quickly caught up. One, because there were other cities that we can use their roadmaps. We can learn from the mistakes that New York, San Francisco, that others, Philadelphia, had made while they were doing their work. And then ultimately, actually accelerated and expanded. We were recognized 3 times in a year, #1 digital government, right? And so we did leaps and bounds and actually accelerated our work even further. So now we're in a place where others are asking us questions on what we're doing. So I think it's a balance, but I think it's also a place where, sure, there's a bit of, friendly competition, but we have far more to gain by collaborating rather than competing. So we're always sharing ideas with our sister partners. There's different academic networks like Harvard's Chief Data Officer Network that we're also a part of, the city as a whole. And so that is a place where we're able to share information. There's different groups like Ignite Cities or Climate Mayors that Mayor Garcetti had started up, where we're able to share information and work together. So that's how we've been able to kind of build the acceleration necessary for some of this change.
So some things sound very advanced, some things sound very romantic, some things sound very artistic, but there's also the very practical nature of there's still a huge area of Los Angeles that just needs the basics. So where do we stand in that regard, and what are some of the priorities on your list to make sure even the most rudimentary safety is put into place when it comes to street lamps?
Right, and so I think you hit it spot on. There's basics to be done. And we're working hard to make sure that the service requests coming out from our residents, we're completing them as fast as we can. It's been a bit of a challenge with the pandemic and what that has brought up for operational change, but still trying to change how we do our work in order to achieve the goals that we want to. I think thinking about our assets strategically, thinking about what we would like in the future, would we like better information and better sensors to share with our sister bureau and departments so that we can manage our curbside better, as is Department of Transportation's Code to Curb kind of initiative. Do we want better air quality information so that we know when to give real-time information to residents when it's safe or not safe? Do we want better control of some of these assets so that we can make the environment a safer place by brightening up street lights or changing it dynamically how we want to? So I think some of those goals we're formulating, and we've created a strategic plan that highlights some of that. But I think most people's plans in 2020 were we're kind of
Yeah,
altered.
just hold on.
So we're obviously in the works to rethink what we actually want, and with some learnings too, right? Like clearly the digital divide is a really big place for us to accelerate and to try and work on, and we're going to be a partner in that, and you know, our plans will now reflect that.
Right.
And so that'll be a very big value moving forward, and a very big value that we're going to be instilling as we kind of shift and course correct the things that we need to do.
Yeah, because in a very weird way, the pandemic, as you mentioned, put a stop to so many things, but also then re-highlighted some things that maybe were not necessarily on the priority list. And, you know, with the Bureau of Streetlight, there was a strategic plan that was put into place in 2020 before you were the director. Mm-hmm. And so is that going to be adjusted? Because as you said, you know, the digital divide may or may not have been as critical when this strategic plan was put into place as you realize it is now. Mm-hmm. So are you having to adapt some of those goals and priorities and outcomes, and, you know, kind of rewrite the 5-year to maybe be a 6.5-year or something?
Well, I think the word you said, adapt, perfectly describes it. Okay. We're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to rewrite some, but the good thing is we're not throwing everything away. We did good work. Norma, the previous director, excellent, very visionary, started working on accelerating co-locations, you know, pushed for other efficiencies as well. Great person. I always loved working with her. And so I think we have all the bones, we have all the pieces of the puzzle that we need. It's gonna be a little bit of reframing, and it's going to be a little bit of prioritization, as you say, for some of the things that we see now as very pressing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a little bit about you. I mean, now that you're the new director, I get to ask all the new director questions. I know you're a UCLA grad, and I know that you are very proud of your cultural heritage. As a matter of fact, you've gone back to the Philippines, and you've kind of relayed what's happening here in Los Angeles, and sort of, you know, talked about what's happening there in Manila. How do you feel about, how did that inform your decisions and what you've become? And do you realize, or do you think about the fact that you are a potential role model for those that look to you to see what their future could look like?
So the role model thing is interesting. It brings up two kind of quotes that I kind of remember from when I was younger. Charles Barkley saying, "I am not a role model," and that very controversial piece that he had. And then Karl Malone saying that role models are chosen. You don't get to choose to be whether you want to or not. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of in the middle, where I wasn't expecting any of this. In fact, you know, I actually see it always takes a village, and there's lots of people that supported and mentored me that I will always forever be grateful for, but never expected to be in roles like I was previously and now. Mm-hmm. But I do recognize that, you know, there's something to be said about representation, mm-hmm. And the fact that others can see that and strive to be that, and we should always be breaking barriers of those types. And so I very much hope that I can inspire and cause others to aspire to meet or beat anything that I do, and I'd also like to help people do that. I think. You know, just like with every predecessor that might have sat in the chair that I currently hold, you know, we're here until we're not, and we're able to pass the torch. And so, however I can mentor, I would love to make sure that others have that opportunity and foster that opportunity for others as well.
Okay, and you're going to get so mad at me. You have this, you know, this innovation. You talked about building computers, and, you know, back in the day when we all had dial-up, et cetera. So you definitely could have taken an entrepreneurial route, you know, and you could have been high-tech, et cetera, but you chose the life of civic service. Mm-hmm. What was it about civic service and government that actually looked as if that's the direction you wanted to take versus, you know, going off and taking your tech skills and utilizing them for your own well-being? Sure.
I'll explain two things to get to that, if you don't mind. So I've always explained to anyone that's worked with me or for me some of my drives, and I've always been fairly good at numbers, fairly good at project management. Some of the strengths that I have, But my passion actually lies into some of the experiences that I've had growing up. So I'm an immigrant, as you kind of mentioned. I'm an immigrant from the Philippines. I grew up in the LA area, went to public school, went to public university, had the opportunity to have my first job. I consider this longest summer job since the 08 kind of 08 09
Exactly.
recession. But having its public opportunity as well, and so all these aspects were shaped by people creating policies and spaces for me to actually exist and thrive. So I would like to give every child that opportunity as well. So that's a driving core kind of value of mine. And so you marry that with kind of some of my strengths, and therefore you find me in kind of the innovation space and looking at things a little bit differently, but always with the perspective and the community in mind. I think that's what causes me to wake up in the morning and continue doing what I'm doing.
I know, and then we benefit because you shut down the crazy ideas that need to get shut down, and you go ahead and say yes to the crazy ideas that should be said yes to. All right, well, there's a lot happening, and it's fun to think about everything that's happening with the Bureau of Street Lighting. But if we hadn't touched on something that people want to find out about, maybe if they just literally want to report an outage light, a light that's out, or offer suggestions for their neighborhood, or somehow get involved with what's happening with the Bureau, what's the easiest and most streamlined way for them to get in touch?
I think you can always reach us through the My LA 311 app. You can always reach us by calling 311. You can reach us at bsl.lacity.org. And our social media accounts, and we'll respond.
Okay, I do want to know, can people request street lamps to be a certain style in their neighborhood? Can they say, I really want a more retro, vintage, high-tech? Can you actually do that?
That's a little bit more complicated than probably time will allow at this point.
Okay, all right. Well, it was so much fun to talk to you, and thank you for being a good sport and allowing me to be so personal, even though we just met.
Oh, of course, thank you. This has been a pleasure.
All right, thanks, Miguel.
Thank you, Maria.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.